Welcome to part 8 of JFK and the Civil Rights Movement. Now we're going to talk about the March on Washington. As I said, June 11th, 1963 really seems to be a turning point for JFK when it comes to the Civil Rights Movement. It really is the moment where he seems to finally get fully behind it. Not only does he take care of the issues going on there at the University of Alabama, but on that same day he's going to give a speech that is going to finally address civil rights directly and exclusively. It's the only time he's going to give a speech that's solely about civil rights. And it's the first and only time he's going to take a public stand on segregation. In this speech, he's going to ask Congress to pass a new civil rights bill that will end all segregation across the entirety of the United States, right? Martin Luther King Jr. is going to be very impressed by this speech. I mean, finally, look, the president's doing something. Matter of fact, it's going to spur him into action. On June 22nd, Martin Luther King Jr. is going to call for a march on Washington to encourage the passage of this new civil rights bill, right? He knew that that would be a very powerful statement, and he knew exactly who to go to help him organize it. He's going to contact A. Philip Randolph, who had organized a march on Washington back during World War II, trying to push for the desegregation of the war industries. Now, Franklin Roosevelt will desegregate the war industries, and as a result, that march won't happen, but A. Philip Randolph knows how to organize it. More than 200,000 people will descend on Washington, D.C. on August 28, 1963 to support the civil rights movement and the passage of a new Civil Rights Act, right? It's going to be during this gathering that Martin Luther King is going to give his most famous speech when he stands on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial and gives his famous "I Have a Dream" speech, right? But this being said, we have all this support for this, but we still also have a lot of resistance. Despite these efforts, there's still a lot of very active and violent resistance to this growing civil rights movement. For example, on June 11th, the day that Kennedy gave his speech, a civil rights activist in Jackson, Mississippi named Medgar Evers was doing his rounds. He came home after midnight, the early morning hours of June 12th. His wife, very excited to tell him about the speech of the president, she never gets the opportunity. Instead, she gets to witness him being gunned down in his driveway in front of her and her child, right? 2 weeks after the March on Washington, on September 15th, in Birmingham, Alabama, there'll be a bombing. So maybe we call it Bombingham now, right? An explosion will destroy Birmingham's 16th Street Baptist Church, killing 4 young African-American girls and injuring 14 others, right? Segregationists had planted somewhere between 10 and 15 sticks of dynamite under the steps of this 50-year-old building. The girls were in the corner of the building where the girls' bathroom was, and their names were Addie Mae Collins, Carol Robertson, and Cynthia Welsey, and Denise McNair. The first 3 girls were 14 years old, and the Denise McNair was only 11. Now, initially, after this bombing, no charges will be filed against the 4 white supremacists who had planned and executed the bombings. But in 1977, finally, Richard Chambliss, who was the ringleader of this, will be convicted of first-degree murder, and 2 others will be convicted in 2001 and 2002. So you see, you still have a lot of resistance and a lot of violence as this moves on. The same day of that September 15th bombing, you'll have a 16-year-old Birmingham African-American shot from behind by a police officer. You'll have another one who was shot while riding his bicycle. And then, of course, you're going to have across 1963, you're going to have 35 black homes and churches firebombed, and 20,000 people will be arrested during civil rights protests.